Above the red-orange clouds of Xyrus 7, space burned with violence. Explosions lit the dark like angry stars. Metal twisted and shattered as warships from two different worlds tore each other apart. The Krell Dominion, a vast empire built on conquest and fear, had thought this battle would be easy. They were wrong. In the heart of the chaos floated the Vorlag's Maw, the largest dreadnought in the Krell fleet. Its black hull bristled with weapons and its command chamber pulsed with eerie green light. Inside that chamber, suspended in a glowing blue containment field, hung a single human, Corporal Jake Ellis. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot and dried blood. A deep gash ran along his temple, and his left arm hung limp, wrapped in a strip of cloth torn from his own jacket. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, hadn't slept in 3, but his eyes, sharp, clear, and burning with quiet fire, never left the Krell warlord standing before him. 3 of them stood in a half-circle, their tall, insect-like bodies covered in chitinous armor. Their eyes were black and lidless, their voices clicking and hissing like stones grinding together. They spoke in their own tongue, but Jake had heard enough over the last hours to understand their meaning. They thought he was broken, they thought he was alone, they were wrong on both counts. Jake had been part of a deep recon team sent to Xyrus 7, after intel suggested the Krell were building a superweapon in the planet's crust. The mission went sideways fast. Ambush. Betrayal by a supposed neutral traitor. His squad, good people, friends, were gone within minutes. Jake had fought his way to the extraction point, dragging a wounded comrade, only to watch the dropship explode before his eyes. He'd been captured alive because the Krell wanted a trophy. A human soldier, defiant to the end, would make fine entertainment for their high command. They didn't know that before his comms died, Jake had sent one last burst transmission. Not a distress call, but coordinates. Earth's last known safe jump point. And a single line, "They've got me. Tell them where." Now, as the Krell chieftain, Vorlag himself, stepped forward, his clawed hand gesturing toward Jake, the human didn't flinch. "You are the last," Vorlag hissed in broken standard English, a language he'd learned just to gloat. "Your kind is weak, scattered. You fight for nothing." Jake coughed, tasting blood. "We fight for each other," he said, voice rough but steady. Vorlag laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Foolish. Your world is far. Your fleet is broken. No one comes for one soldier." Jake looked past him, out the massive viewport of the command chamber. Beyond the dreadnought, the battle still raged, but it was clearly turning. Krell ships were falling back. Their formations were breaking. Something was wrong. Even the Krell could feel it. A tension in the void, a silence where there should be noise. Jake knew what it was. He'd felt it too, deep in his bones. Earth hadn't forgotten him, and they were coming. But he said nothing. Let them think they'd won. Let them enjoy their last moments of arrogance. Outside, the stars began to flicker, not from damage, not from weapons fire, from something else. Something huge. Vorlag turned, sensing the shift in his crew's posture. Alarms began to chirp softly on the bridge consoles. A junior Krell officer screeched something in panic. "What is this?" Vorlag demanded, his voice rising. Then, space itself tore open, not with fire or light, but with a deep, silent rupture, like fabric splitting in the dark. And from that tear, ships began to emerge. First 1, then 10, then 100, sleek, silver-gray warships, their hulls marked with the simple, bold insignia of a united Earth, a blue circle wrapped in olive branches. They came in perfect formation, engines humming with restrained power, weapons already charged. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just cold, disciplined might. The Krell fleet froze. Even from inside the containment field, Jake could see the panic spreading across the alien bridge. Officers scrambled. Weapons officers shouted. Vorlag's mandibles twitched in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. But it wasn't. Impossible. It was promise. Earth's unified defense fleet hadn't just answered the call, they'd arrived in full strength. Carriers the size of cities. Destroyers faster than thought. Battleships bristling with railguns and plasma lances. And they weren't here to negotiate. They were here for one man. Jake closed his eyes for just a second. Not from pain. From relief. From pride they came. He opened them again, meeting Vorlag's gaze. "You were saying?" Jake asked, voice low but clear. Vorlag snarled, slamming a claw against the console. "Kill him now!" Two Krell guards rushed toward the containment field, weapons raised. But before they could fire, the dreadnought rocked violently. A deep boom echoed through the hull. Earth's opening salvo had struck home. Lights flickered. The containment field sputtered. Jake dropped to the deck, rolling just as a plasma bolt scorched the air where he'd been. He moved fast, ignoring the pain in his arm. Grabbing a fallen Krell sidearm from a nearby console, he fired once, clean, precise, and one guard fell. The other lunged. Jake sidestepped, using the alien's momentum against it, driving the butt of the weapon into its joint. It screeched and collapsed. Breathing hard, Jake backed toward the viewport, weapon raised, watching as the human armada advanced. Hundreds of ships moving as one. No chaos, no fear, just purpose. In that moment, he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a symbol, and Earth had come to reclaim him. Vorlag roared in fury, ordering his fleet to regroup to form a defensive ring around the dreadnought. But it was too late. The human ships were already splitting into attack wings, weaving through Krell lines like ghosts. Explosions bloomed across the void, Krell cruisers vanishing in silent fireballs. On the bridge of the lead human battleship, far beyond the viewport, Admiral Lisa Torres watched the feed from a long-range probe. She saw the dreadnought, she saw the containment chamber, and she saw Jake, alive, fighting, standing tall amid enemies. "Delta Vanguard," she said into the comm, her voice calm but firm. "Form up, we're bringing him home." Back on the Verlag's maw, Jake leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His body ached, his vision blurred at the edges, but he smiled, because out there among the stars, humanity had just sent a message to the galaxy: harm one of ours, and the whole of Earth will answer. No exceptions, no delays, no one left behind. On Luna Command, deep beneath the gray surface of Earth's moon, the air hummed with quiet tension. The central operations room was a wide, circular chamber lit by soft blue panels and filled with rows of consoles. Officers moved quickly but calmly, their voices low, their eyes fixed on screens showing star maps, fleet statuses, and sensor readouts. At the center of it all stood Admiral Lisa Torres. She was tall, with sharp eyes and short black hair streaked with silver. She wore the dark blue uniform of the Unified Earth Defense Force, the insignia on her shoulder gleaming under the lights. She hadn't slept in over 30 hours, but exhaustion didn't show on her face, only focus. In her hand, she held a data chip. It contained the last transmission from Corporal Jake Ellis. The signal had been weak, broken by static, nearly lost in the noise of deep space. But they'd recovered enough. Coordinates, a voice, and 3 words that now echoed in every command center from Mars to Titan. "They've got me." Torres replayed the audio one more time. Jake's voice, hoarse, tired but steady, filled her earpiece. "Tell them where. No backup needed, just make sure they know." She removed the earpiece and looked up at the main display. It showed Xyrus 7, a hostile world on the edge of known space now swarming with Krell ships. And somewhere in that mess, one human soldier was still alive. Earth hadn't fought a full-scale war in decades. After the Orion Accords, humanity had turned inward, rebuilding, uniting, exploring. But they never forgot their creed. It wasn't written in law. It was deeper than that. Passed down from soldier to soldier, parent to child. No one left behind. Torres turned to her executive officer, Commander Dana Wilkes. "Status on fleet mobilization?" "All shipyards are at full output," Dana replied. She was young, mid-30s, with a calm voice and quick hands. "Phobos Iron Resolve is ready. So are the carrier groups from Ganymede and Ceres. Captain Riley just confirmed the Aegis Dawn can jump within the hour." "Good," Torres said. "We don't have days. We have hours." She walked to the large window overlooking the lunar dockyards. Outside, through thick reinforced glass, massive warships floated in silent readiness. Workers in exosuits swarmed over hulls, loading munitions, running final diagnostics. The Aegis Dawn, a battleship over 2 kilometers long, gleamed under the floodlights, its railgun turrets rotating slowly in test mode. On its bridge, Captain Dan Riley stood with his arms crossed, watching his crew prepare. He was a broad-shouldered man with a quiet way about him, the kind who spoke little but listened well. His first officer, Lieutenant Maria Cruz, approached with a datapad. "All systems green, sir. Hyperspace drive charged. Weapons hot," Riley nodded. "Tell engineering to double-check the shield harmonics. I want 0 failures when we drop in." "Yes, sir." He turned to the viewport, staring out at the stars. He'd known Jake Ellis briefly. They'd shared a drink at a fleet reunion 2 years back. Jake had talked about his sister back in Colorado, about fixing old motorcycles, about how he joined the service because someone's got to watch the back door. Riley hadn't forgotten that. Now, that back door was wide open, and Earth was walking through it. Meanwhile, on the repair dock orbiting Titan, engineer Rico Mendez wiped grease from his hands and stared at the screen in front of him. His ship, the destroyer Swift Justice, had just come out of overhaul. It wasn't the biggest or the flashiest, but it was fast, and Rico knew every bolt on it. "You sure we're ready?" asked pilot Chloe Bennett, leaning against the bulkhead. She was small but tough, with bright eyes and a smirk that never quite left her face. "Ready as we'll ever be," Rico said. "Engines are tuned, weapons synced, and I even fixed that squeak in your cockpit." Chloe laughed. "You're a lifesaver, Rico. Just don't get us shot down before we find Jake," he said, half joking. "No promises," she shot back, heading for the hangar. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out. Crews boarded ships. Families said quiet goodbyes over comms. Medics stocked trauma kits. Pilots ran sim drills. No one asked why they were going. They already knew. Back on Luna, Torres gave the final order. "Activate Protocol, Phoenix," she said. The room fell silent for one heartbeat. Then every console lit up with confirmation codes. Across the network, ships received the same message. Full mobilization authorized. Objective, rescue and extraction. Priority Alpha. It was the first time in 50 years that Earth's entire defense fleet had been called to arms. Not for invasion, not for conquest, but for one man. Torres returned to the main display. She zoomed in on Xeris 7. Sensor ghosts flickered at the edge of range. Krell patrols, defensive grids, orbital mines. It would be a gauntlet, but humanity had faced worse. She opened a secure channel to all fleet commanders. "This isn't just a rescue," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's a promise. We do not abandon our own. Not ever. Form up. Jump on my mark." On the Aegis Dawn, Riley stood tall on the bridge. "Helm, set course for Xeris 7, all hands, battle stations." On the Swift Justice, Chloe strapped into her fighter. "Let's go bring our boy home." In the medical bay of the carrier Hope's Edge, Corpsman Nina Patel checked her trauma kit one last time. She'd trained for this, trained to run into fire to save a life. She didn't know Jake, but she knew what he represented. Courage, loyalty, the unbreakable thread that tied every human together, no matter how far apart they were. As the countdown to hyperspace began, a strange calm settled over the fleet. No cheers, no speeches, just the quiet certainty of people doing what had to be done. Because out there, alone and wounded, a soldier was waiting and Earth was coming for him. Not as a favor, not as a gesture, but as a duty, the kind that defined them. As the first ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving trails of warped light behind them, Luna Command grew quiet again. But the mission was no longer just a hope. It was underway, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when you took one of Earth's own. You didn't just make an enemy. You woke up an entire planet. Space above Xeris 7 had been quiet for only a moment before it shattered. 1 second, the void was filled with the drifting wreckage of earlier battles. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, silent alarms blinking from dead ships. The next, reality itself seemed to tear open with a deep, soundless crack. No explosion, no flash. Just a sudden ripple like a stone dropped into black water. Then they came. First, a single battleship emerged. Long, silver gray, its hull marked with the blue and olive insignia of Earth. Its engines glowed faint blue as it stabilized in real space. Then another appeared beside it. Then 10 more. Then 100. Within seconds, the sky was full. The unified Earth defense fleet poured out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Carriers as wide as cities, destroyers sleek and fast, cruisers bristling with railguns, orbital artillery platforms humming with stored energy. They didn't scatter. They didn't hesitate. They arrived like a wall of steel and fire, stretching from one edge of the starfield to the other. On the bridge of the Vorlag's maw, panic erupted. Krell officers shouted in their clicking tongue. Warning lights flashed red across every console. The Dreadnought's defensive grid, designed to withstand heavy assault, began to flicker under the sheer energy output of the human fleet's arrival. Sensors overloaded, comms filled with static. Vorlag, the Krell warlord, stood frozen for a heartbeat, his black eyes wide with disbelief. This cannot be. he hissed. Earth has no fleet this size. They are fractured, weak. But the evidence was right in front of him, and it was moving from the lead human battleship, the Iron Resolve. Admiral Lisa Torres watched. The Krell fleet through the main viewport. Her expression didn't change. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply gave the order. Delta Vanguard, form up. Target the dreadnought holding our soldier. All other units, suppress enemy flanks. Do not let a single Krell ship break through. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. On the Aegis Dawn, Captain Dan Riley relayed the command. Weapons, lock on primary target. Helm, bring us to intercept. Aye, sir, came the reply. Across the fleet, crews moved with practiced precision. Gunners aligned targeting systems. Shield technicians boosted front emitters. Pilots in fighter bays powered up their engines, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Among them was Chloe Bennett. Strapped into her interceptor, she flexed her fingers on the controls. Rico, you seeing this? She asked over the comm. Loud and clear, Rico Mendez replied from the Swift Justice. See you. Just don't show off too much. We've got a job to do. No promises, Chloe said with a grin, even though no one could see it. Then the order came. Launch fighters. Hundreds of human interceptors shot from their bays like sparks from a fire. They streaked toward the Krell lines fast and deadly. The Krell scrambled to respond, launching their own fighters, bulky, insect-like craft that moved in chaotic swarms. But the human pilots flew in tight formations, covering each other, striking with surgical precision. Explosions bloomed across the void. Silent. Brilliant flashes of light as ships collided or were torn apart by railgun slugs and plasma bursts. On the Iron Resolve, Admiral Torres watched the battle unfold. Her eyes stayed fixed on the Vorlag's maw. That was the only ship that mattered now. Status on jamming? She asked. Krell comms are scrambled, ma'am, replied Commander Dana Wilkes. They can't call for reinforcements. Good. Keep it that way. Meanwhile, inside the dreadnought, Jake Ellis pressed himself against the wall of the command chamber, still holding the stolen Krell sidearm. The ship had rocked hard when the first human salvo hit, knocking out lights and weakening the containment field long enough for him to escape. Now, he listened to the chaos outside, shouts, alarms, the distant thud of impacts. He knew what it meant. They were here. Earth had come. He looked out the viewport again. The human armada filled the sky, not just ships and his ships. The ones he'd trained on, dreamed of serving aboard, and they'd crossed light years just for him. A strange warmth filled his chest. Not hope. Something stronger. Pride. Back in the battle, the Aegis Dawn led the charge. Captain Riley stood firm as his ship took fire from 2 Krell cruisers. Shields flared blue under the assault, but held. Return fire, Riley ordered. The Aegis Dawn's main railgun battery roared to life. 6 massive slugs, each the size of a small car, shot forward at near light speed. They punched through the first Krell cruiser like paper, tearing it in half. The second tried to dodge, but too late. A plasma lance from a nearby destroyer finished it off. Target down, the weapons officer reported. Stay sharp, Riley said. We're not done. Above them, Chloe danced through enemy fire, her interceptor weaving between Krell fighters. She locked onto one, fired a burst of guided missiles, and watched it explode. That's for Jake, she muttered. On the ground of Xyrus 7, Krell ground forces looked up in terror as the sky burned with war. Their orbital defenses were failing. Their fleet was crumbling, and the humans showed no sign of slowing. On the Iron Resolve, Torres gave the next order. Prepare breaching teams. We're going in. In the assault bay, Sergeant Nina Patel checked her team's gear. 6 soldiers, all volunteers, all ready to die if it meant bringing Jake home. She looked at each of them. Remember, speed and silence. We get in, grab 'em, get out. No heroics. They nodded. They understood. Because this wasn't just a mission. It was a promise. And humanity always kept its promises. As the human fleet tightened its grip around the Vorlag's maw, the dreadnought began to list. Fires burned in its engine section. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Vorlag screamed orders, but his voice was lost in the growing storm of human might. Outside, the stars were no longer visible. Not because of darkness, but because Earth's fleet had blotted them out. And in the center of it all, one wounded soldier stood tall, watching his people come for him. Not as a last resort, but as a first duty. The message was clear to every alien who saw it. Harm one human, and you face them all. No exceptions. No mercy. No one left behind. Inside the Vorlag's maw, the air smelled of burning metal and something sour, like rotting plants. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridors, casting long shadows. Alarms wailed in a language no human could understand, but their meaning was clear. The ship was dying. Jake Ellis moved fast. Despite the pain in his side and the throbbing in his arm, he kept low, pressing against the curved walls of the alien hallway. His stolen Krell sidearm felt awkward in his hand, but it fired, and that was all that mattered. Behind him, the command chamber was empty except for 2 dead guards and a flickering console. He knew he couldn't stay hidden for long. The Krell would hunt him. And with Earth's fleet hammering the dreadnought from outside, the ship's systems were failing fast. Oxygen levels were dropping. Gravity fluctuated, sometimes pulling him down hard, other times making him float for a few seconds before slamming back to the floor. But Jake wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about buying time. Because if Earth had come this far, they wouldn't just orbit and wait. They'd send someone in, and when they did, he needed to be ready. He rounded a corner and froze. 3 Krell soldiers stood at the far end of the corridor, scanning with handheld sensors. Their armored bodies clicked as they moved, their black eyes scanning every shadow. Jake ducked behind a broken conduit panel. His heart pounded. He counted his shots, 5 left. Not enough for a fight. He'd have to be smarter. Just then, a deep boom shook the ship. Another human salvo had struck the hull. Lights went out. The Krell soldiers staggered, confused. Jake didn't wait. He rolled out, fired twice, 2 clean shots to the head, and dropped 2 of them before they could react. The third spun, raising its weapon, but Jake was already moving. He slammed into it, driving his elbow into its neck joint. The alien screeched and collapsed. He grabbed its rifle, bulkier but with more power, and kept moving. He didn't know the layout of the dreadnought, but he remembered the schematics from intel briefings. If he could reach the secondary hangar on Deck 7, he might find a shuttle, or at least a place to hold out. But he never made it that far. A new sound cut through the chaos. Not Krell, not explosions, but something sharp and mechanical. A thud. Then another, like something heavy striking metal from the outside. Jake stopped. He knew that sound. Breaching pods. Earth wasn't just waiting. They were already inside. Sure enough, down the corridor, a section of the hull exploded inward in a flash of white light. Smoke poured out, and through it stepped a figure in a black tactical exosuit. Helmet sealed, rifle raised. Sergeant Nina Patel. Behind her, 5 more soldiers fanned out, weapons scanning. They moved like ghosts. Quiet, fast, deadly. Clear left, one said. Clear right, another replied. Nina's voice came over the comm, calm and steady. This is Delta Team, we're in. Moving to last known location of Ellis. Jake stepped out from the shadows, rifle lowered. You're a little late, he called. Every soldier spun, weapons snapping toward him, but Nina raised a hand. Hold fire! She walked forward, visor retracting to reveal her face, sharp eyes, short dark hair, a thin scar across her cheek. She looked him up and down, then gave a small smile. Took you long enough to get caught, Ellis. Wasn't my plan, Jake said, leaning against the wall. His legs were shaking now. Adrenaline was fading and pain was winning. Nina stepped closer, pulling a med kit from her belt. Can you walk? Barely, he admitted. Good enough. She injected a stim into his neck. Warmth spread through his body, dulling the pain just enough. We've got a shuttle waiting 3 decks down. But the Krell know we're here. It's gonna get loud. As if on cue, klaxons blared. Heavy footsteps echoed from both ends of the corridor. Incoming, shouted one of the soldiers. Nina didn't flinch. Ellis, stay behind me. Rest of you cover the rear. We move fast, we move quiet, and we don't stop for anything. They ran. The dreadnought became a maze of fire and fury. Krell soldiers poured from side passages, firing strange energy weapons that left trails of green light. Human rifles barked in return, short, controlled bursts. One soldier went down clutching his leg, but another dragged him up without breaking stride. Jake kept moving, using the wall for support. His vision blurred, but he focused on Nina's back, on the blue Earth insignia on her shoulder. They reached a junction. To the left, a lift. To the right, a maintenance shaft. Shaft, Nina ordered. Lift's probably trapped. They climbed down a narrow ladder into darkness. Below, the sounds of battle were muffled, but the ship still shook with every hit from outside. Halfway down, The wall exploded. A Krell warrior, bigger than the others, covered in spiked armor, lunged through the hole, roaring. It swung a blade the size of a door. Nina fired 3 shots into its chest. It barely flinched. "Fall back," she yelled. But Jake, acting on instinct, grabbed a loose pipe from the wall and jammed it into the creature's eye. It shrieked, thrashing, giving Nina the opening she needed. She fired point blank into its neck. It collapsed. "Nice move," she said, pulling Jake along. They reached the bottom and sprinted through a service tunnel. Finally, they saw it, a small human shuttle, its hatch open, engines humming softly. 2 more soldiers stood guard. "Get him in!" Nina shouted as Jake stumbled toward the shuttle. The ceiling above them caved in. Vorlag himself dropped down, surrounded by elite guards. His armor was scorched, one claw broken, but his eyes burned with rage. "You will not take him," he hissed. Nina raised her rifle. "Like hell we won't," the Krell charged. Gunfire filled the tunnel. Human soldiers fired without hesitation. One went down. Then another, but they held the line. Jake turned back. "Nina, go! I'll hold them." "Not a chance," she snapped, shoving him into the shuttle. "You're coming home." She jumped in after him and slammed the hatch control. The door sealed just as Krell blades struck it from the outside. "Punch it," Nina yelled to the pilot. The shuttle's engines roared. It shot forward, tearing through the dreadnought's weakened hull and bursting into open space. Outside, the battle still raged, but the human fleet was winning. Krell ships burned and drifted. The Vorlag's maw listed heavily, fire spreading across its surface. Inside the shuttle, Jake slumped into a seat, breathing hard. Nina knelt beside him, checking his wounds. "You okay?" she asked. He looked out the viewport at the fleet, hundreds of ships all fighting for him. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "I'm okay, because for the first time in days, he wasn't alone. He was going home, and Earth had proven, once and for all, that no matter how far, no matter the cost, they never left one of their own behind." The shuttle shook as it broke free of the Vorlag's maw, its hull groaning under the strain. Outside, space was a storm of fire and steel. Krell ships spun out of control, their engines dead, their weapons silent. Human fighters darted through the chaos like wolves among wounded prey. The dreadnought itself was breaking apart, great chunks of its black armor peeling away like burnt skin. Inside the shuttle, Jake Ellis leaned against the wall, his breathing shallow but steady. The stim Nina had given him was wearing off, and pain crept back into his bones. But he kept his eyes open, watching the battle through the small viewport. Nina Patel sat across from him, reloading her rifle with practiced hands. Her exosuit was scorched, one sleeve torn, but she looked calm. Beside her, the pilot, Corporal Leo Garza, focused on the controls, weaving through debris with sharp, smooth movements. 2 minutes to the iron resolve, Leo said, voice tight but controlled. Krell are still throwing everything they've got at us. As if to prove his point, a burst of green plasma slammed into the shuttle's rear shield. The craft shuddered, lights flickering. "Shields at 40%, Leo warned. "Just keep us flying," Nina said. She turned to Jake. "How you holding up?" "Better than that dreadnought," Jake managed, offering a weak smile. Nina nodded, but her eyes stayed serious. She knew the hardest part wasn't over. Extraction was never safe until the hatch sealed on a friendly ship. On the bridge of the Aegis Dawn, Captain Dan Riley watched the shuttle's signal on his display. It was small, fragile, and surrounded by enemy fire. His jaw tightened. "Escort wing, form up on that shuttle," he ordered. "I don't care if you have to ram a Krell cruiser, keep it safe." "Copy that," came the reply. Instantly, 6 human interceptors peeled off from the main fleet and streaked toward the shuttle. Among them was Chloe Bennett. She locked onto a Krell gunship targeting the shuttle and fired a full missile spread. "Eat this, ugly," she muttered as the missile struck, blowing the alien ship into glowing fragments. Rico Mendez's voice crackled over her comm. "Show off." "You're just jealous I got the kill," she shot back, already lining up her next target. Above them, the iron resolve loomed like a mountain of steel. Its hangar bay doors were open, glowing with soft amber light, a beacon in the storm. Leo guided the shuttle toward it, sweat beading on his forehead. "Brace for evasive," he warned. He jerked the controls hard left as a Krell frigate fired a broadside. Energy bolts screamed past the hull. One clipped the wing, sending sparks flying. Wing damage, minor, Leo reported. Still flyable. Good enough, Nina said, gripping a handhold. Jake, hold on. We're almost there. Jake nodded, clutching his injured arm. He could see the hangar now. Huge, bright, safe. It felt like a dream after days in the dark. But the Krell weren't done. From the wreckage of the Vorlag's maw, a final Krell cruiser powered up its engines. It was damaged, smoking, but its main weapon still glowed with deadly charge. It turned, not toward the fleet but toward the shuttle. Vorlag's last act of spite. On the Aegis Dawn, Riley saw it too. They're targeting the shuttle. He didn't hesitate. Helm, full thrust toward that cruiser. Weapons, fire everything we've got. The massive battleship surged forward, cutting between the shuttle and the Krell cruiser like a shield. Railgun slugs tore through space, followed by plasma bursts. The Krell ship tried to fire, but the Aegis Dawn's shields absorbed the first blast. The second hit the hull, tearing a gash along the side. Alarms blared on Riley's bridge. Shield generators offline on decks 5 through 8, an officer shouted. Keep firing, Riley said, voice steady. Don't let that shot get through. The Aegis Dawn unleashed a final devastating volley. The Krell cruiser exploded in a silent fireball, its core rupturing. On the shuttle, Leo exhaled. Clear path. Good, Nina said. Now get us home. The shuttle slipped into the hangar bay of the Iron Resolve, with seconds to spare. Magnetic clamps locked onto its frame. Atmosphere hissed as the bay repressurized. The hatch opened. Medics rushed in, followed by armed guards. They gently lifted Jake onto a stretcher. He tried to protest, but his body gave out. Darkness tugged at the edges of his vision. He's stable, one medic said, but he needs surgery fast. Nina walked beside the stretcher as they carried him through the ship's corridors. Crew members lined the halls, not cheering, not shouting, but standing at attention, hands behind their backs, eyes full of respect. Jake saw them through half-closed eyes. He recognized the look. It wasn't pity. It was pride. Pride in one of their own who'd held the line alone. They reached the medical bay. Doctors waited, tools ready. As they moved him to the operating table, Jake caught Nina's arm. Tell them thank you, he whispered. They already know, she said softly. You're one of us. That's all that matters. She stepped back as the doors closed. On the bridge, Admiral Lisa Torres received the report. Extraction complete. Ellis is aboard stable. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a small breath. But there was no celebration. Not yet. All ships, she said over the fleet-wide channel, secure the area. No Krell vessel leaves this system. The human fleet tightened its grip. Remaining Krell ships either surrendered or were destroyed. Within the hour, the battle was over. Cyrus 7's orbit was quiet again. But now, it was a quiet of victory. In the medical bay, Jake drifted in and out of consciousness. He heard voices, felt hands working on his wounds, smelled antiseptic instead of blood and smoke. And then, a familiar voice. You look like hell, said Captain Riley, standing at the foot of the bed. His uniform was torn, his face smudged with soot, but he was smiling. Feel like it too, Jake murmured. Riley nodded. Rest up. Earth's waiting. Outside the ship, the stars shone clear again. The human armada held formation, proud and strong. They hadn't come for territory, hadn't come for revenge. They'd come for one man, and they'd brought him home. Because in the heart of every human ship, in every soldier's oath, in every command given and followed, lived a simple truth. No one gets left behind. Not today. Not ever. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star wrapped in silence. No sirens, no fanfare. Just the soft hum of engines and the glow of re-entry heat against its hull. Inside, Jake Ellis sat by the window, wrapped in a clean uniform, his arm in a brace. His face still pale, but his eyes clear. Below, the blue curve of Earth grew larger. Oceans, clouds, Greenland. Home. It had been weeks since the battle over 07. Weeks of healing, debriefings, and quiet nights aboard the Iron Resolve as the fleet made its slow journey back. Jake had slept more than he had in years, eaten real food, walked without pain, but nothing felt as real as this moment, seeing Earth again, knowing he'd made it back. The shuttle touched down at Colorado Spaceport just after dawn. Mist hung low over the hills and the air smelled of pine and wet grass. As the hatch opened, sunlight streamed in. Waiting on the tarmac were not generals or politicians, but people. His sister, Lisa, stood at the front, arms crossed, eyes red but smiling. Behind her, neighbors, old friends, veterans from his hometown, all quiet, all watching. Jake stepped down the ramp slowly. His boots hit solid ground for the first time in months. He didn't say anything at first, just walked to his sister and hugged her tight. "You idiot," she whispered, voice breaking. "You scared 10 years off my life." "Sorry," he said, holding on like he'd never let go. Around them, the crowd stayed silent. No cheers, no cameras, just respect. This wasn't a victory parade. It was a homecoming. Meanwhile, across the planet, people watched, not on official news channels, but on public feeds, on street screens, in schoolrooms and cafes. The footage from Zyrus 7 had spread fast, grainy, raw, but powerful. The lone human in the alien ship. The moment the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the shuttle racing through fire to safety. Children pointed at the screens. "That's one of ours," teacher said. And they came for him. All of them. In New York, a group of teenagers stood outside a recruitment office talking quietly. In Tokyo, an old veteran saluted a passing transport bearing the Earth insignia. In Nairobi, families gathered around shared screens, showing their kids what unity looked like. The message wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It was written in every ship that jumped, every soldier who charged, every commander who said, "We go." No human left behind, not for politics, not for glory, just because it was right. On the moon, Admiral Lisa Torres stood on the observation deck of Luna Command, watching Earth turn below. She held a simple data chip, the original transmission from Jake. She didn't need to play it. She knew the words by heart. She turned to Commander Dana Wilkes, who stood beside her. "Do you think they understand?" Torres asked. "Who?" Dana replied. "Everyone. The galaxy, the Krell, the neutral systems watching from the shadows." Dana thought for a moment. "They understand now. Today they saw what happens when you take one of us." Torres nodded. "Good. She didn't want war. But if the galaxy thought humanity was soft, scattered, or weak, they'd just been shown the truth. Earth was united. And it protected its own. Back in Colorado, Jake sat on his porch that evening, wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee. The mountains rose in the distance, purple in the twilight. His sister sat beside him. "What now?" she asked. "Don't know," he said. "Maybe fix that old bike in the garage. Maybe just breathe for a while." She smiled. "You earned it." He looked up at the sky. Stars were coming out one by one. Somewhere out there, the Aegis Dawn was docked at Mars shipyard. Chloe Bennett was probably racing Rico Mendez in simulators again. Nina Patel was training a new extraction team. And Captain Riley? He was likely already planning the next patrol. Jake didn't feel like a hero. He'd just done his job. "Stayed alive," sent the signal. But Earth had done the rest, and that was the point. It wasn't about one man. It was about all of them standing together, no matter the distance, no matter the cost. Later that night, as he lay in his old bed, listening to crickets and wind in the trees, Jake finally slept without dreams of fire or falling. He was safe, because he was home, and home had come for him. In the weeks that followed, the story spread not as propaganda but as truth. Schools taught it. Veterans shared it over campfires. Diplomats referenced it in quiet talks with alien envoys. The Krell Dominion didn't attack again. Other hostile factions grew cautious. Neutral systems began reaching out, asking what kind of people would send an entire fleet for a single soldier. The answer was simple. Humans. Loyal. Fierce. Unbroken. And always watching each other's backs. Years later, a small monument was placed at the spaceport in Colorado. Not grand. Not flashy. Just a steel plaque with a single line. "No one left behind." Below it, the names of every ship that jumped to Zero 7 were etched in clean, bold letters. Hundreds of them. A silent testament to what humanity would do for one of its own. Jake visited it often, sometimes alone, sometimes with his sister, sometimes with new recruits who wanted to see the man who started it all. He never liked the attention. "I didn't start anything," he'd say. "I just held on. They did the rest, and that was the truth. Because in the end, it wasn't about the prisoner in the glowing field. It was about the fleet that blotted out the stars to bring him home. And as long as Earth stood, that promise would never fade. Not for one, not for any. No one left behind."